Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name's Katherine Burgess and I'm with Smart Growth America and the National Brownfields Coalition, and we're thrilled to host you for today's webinar on innovative approaches to partnerships for brownfields remediation and redevelopment. We have three incredible speakers and we're looking forward to a vibrant dialogue amongst the speakers and with all of you. Next slide, please. This webinar is hosted by Smart Growth America, and we're a national nonprofit focused on advancing policy change so transportation, housing, and redevelopment choices can create communities that are healthy, prosperous, and resilient. We run a number of programs and coalitions which bring together practitioners and people from industry to advocate to help us achieve this vision in terms of federal policy change, as well as policy change at the state and local level. You'll see a number of our programs below, including the Center for Zoning Solutions, Locus, our coalition of triple bottom line real estate developers, and the National Brownfields Coalition, which is hosting the programming today. Next slide. Yeah, next slide, please. And at Smart Growth America, we see all of these different disciplines coming together to help support neighborhoods and communities that are vibrant, inclusive, affordable, and welcoming, where there's housing at all sorts of different levels of affordability, easy access to transportation, jobs, civic resources, and places that bring people together. And we think brownfields redevelopment is a key part of this by redeveloping sites which were previously underutilized, vacant, and often unsafe. We're able to create more housing and resources to contribute to vibrant, strong communities. Next slide. So the National Brownfields Coalition is a really unique group. It's a nonpartisan alliance of industry leaders, public sector practitioners, and others who advocate for policy change to responsibly clean up and reuse underutilized or environmentally impacted land. And we educate by hosting webinars and other programming like this. We advocate, through legislative advocacy as well as other engagement with Capitol Hill, and we work together to advance the field. And we'd encourage all of you to take a look and think about joining us. Next slide. Oh, you heard about this already, but we'd really encourage folks to let us know too through the chat and otherwise what your top priority issues are as you seek partnerships and other innovative strategies to advance brownfields redevelopment. And we hope the coalition can be a resource to you to move policy change forward. Next slide. We have a really incredible group of speakers today, and this group has come together to help support everyone here and to work together to look at strategies for partnerships for brownfields redevelopment. How do you engage different entities, different communities to both come together on the vision for a brownfields project and also to establish the funding sources to make it happen? So I'm thrilled to have these speakers with us today. I'm in a few moments turn it over to Krista Stoneham, who is the president and CEO of the Houston Land Bank. Krista, we're so thrilled you can join us today. She's also a member of the National Brownfields Coalition Steering Committee and the chair of our Education Committee. And at Houston Land Bank, she has led transformative initiatives repurposing over $100 million worth of vacant and underutilized land into affordable housing and other important and vibrant community uses. We'll also be hearing from Chris Jack, who's the Brownfields and Community Revitalization Lead at Montrose Environmental. And throughout his career, he has implemented over 50 EPA brownfields projects across the country. So he brings us years of environmental consulting and brownfields redevelopment expertise, and he has supported municipal, tribal, and community-based organizations with building successful programs. Finally, we'll hear from Matthew Hopkin, who founded and leads the RMI Brightfields Accelerator program that's at the Rocky Mountain Institute. We're thrilled to have Matthew come to talk to us about brownfields to brightfields and strategies to utilize brownfield sites for renewable energy production. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Krista. And I also like to note, that we will be recording this webinar and it'll be available afterwards on YouTube as well as circulated to everyone who signed up. As Krista kicks us off, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, where you're located, the type of work that you do, and it will help the speakers really customize our remarks today to respond to your interests. So with that, thank you, Krista. I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Krista Stoneham, and I proudly serve as the president and CEO of the Houston Land Bank. But I also have the pleasure of serving the National Brownfields Coalition as one of the co-chairs of the Education Subcommittee. On the next slide, you will see a little bit about who we are and what we're about, but really just grateful for your time and the opportunity to share a little bit more about who I am, also more about the committee. If you could please advance the slide when you have a moment. Okay, while that's coming up, on the next slide, we will talk about really just who the committee is, how we show up and serve, and more importantly, why we're here to share webinars and different components of just the educational tools and resources. I'll say, as a leader of a nonprofit, but also a government nonprofit, we really have to know best practices. And sometimes that's just difficult to do on the local level, to be able to have that capacity to research what's going on nationally, definitely in the brownfield space. And with the differences in federal funding, there are a lot of different shifts. And being a part of the education and outreach subcommittee gives me the opportunity to connect with people nationally on what's going on in terms of best practices, what other people are experiencing in terms of challenges, but most importantly, how can we innovate a solution? Next slide, you'll see a little bit more about what we mean by solutions, because we really need these partnerships in order to accelerate the work. Like I said, I work in the government space, the nonprofit space, and I work with the community. And really, it requires a multiple layered approach when it comes to the partnership levels of activating brownfields. You need the technical expertise, you need to align with the neighborhood goals and the visioning, you need to identify where resources are, and just these long-term relationships for long-term projects, because these also don't happen overnight. The potential contaminants didn't come overnight, and definitely the solution won't as well. So really, partnerships are key when it comes to moving forward on brownfields. And myself, in addition to our fellow panelists, are going to share more case studies about how they partner in their respective spaces, and then we'll have a discussion. So I'm going to pass it off to my co-chair, Chris, so he can share a little bit more about his expertise and opportunities that he's created with community-driven brownfield programs.
Thanks a lot, Krista. And before I get into my presentation, I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Krista said about the National Brownfields Coalition. I joined earlier this year, and I finally feel like I've got my finger on the pulse of key decisions that are being made in Washington that affect these critical programs and resources. And I think we all know there's been no shortage of that this year, including even today. So I feel like I've really got a seat at the table too, to those that are advocating on behalf of brownfields, and really have common interests and concerns about the day-to-day activities related to brownfields in this country. And then additionally, I'm really enjoying having a network of colleagues and collaborators across the country that we can work together on and leverage our expertise to help communities of all shapes and sizes throughout the country. So with that public service announcement out of the way, we'll go on to the next slide. So as mentioned, over the past 20 years, I've had the pleasure of building brownfield programs in dozens of communities all throughout the country. And over those years, one of the common questions I get are, "Hey, Chris, we've got this huge brownfield site in the middle of our community. It's got significant blight. It's a nuisance, and we suspect that it poses a significant threat to human health and the environment in our community. How can I get this disengaged property owner to the table, to participate in our program? So over the years, I've evolved my answer to that question, and I'd like to share my answers and experience with you folks today. But I do have one other short public service announcement. Next slide. So I'm the practice leader for brownfields and community revitalization at Montrose Environmental. We are an environmentally focused global firm. Because we're focused squarely on the environment, we do a little bit more in that space than just consulting and engineering. For example, in our testing segment of the company, we own a network of nationally accredited laboratories throughout the United States that can test, soil, groundwater, and vapor on brownfield projects. And then we've got as well a really exciting division of our company that does research and development for remediation projects called Emerging Contaminant Treatment Technologies, or ECT2. And we're very proud that our products include a regenerable ion for PFAS treatment in water, and they've treated over 15 billion gallons of PFAS impacted water over the last few years. So next slide. But I'm focused squarely on managing our brownfields and community revitalization program. And, this is just a fancy diagram to say that we get excited about helping communities secure funding and then doing, grant funded work in the environmental site assessment, cleanup, and redevelopment planning realm. And we support brownfield redevelopment projects all the way through restoration and reuse. So with those public service announcements done, I'll get back to the topic at hand, which is how to engage with property owners in brownfield projects. So next slide. So as I think all the panelists are going to confirm and reiterate, community engagement in community-driven brownfield projects is amazingly important and critical. Community engagement with a wide range of stakeholders is important to confirm, the needs and opportunities within each community, set up goals and objectives for the programs, identify specific brownfield impacted target areas and potential catalyst sites, and then really have a seat at the table in developing vision and action plans and reuse strategies as well. The stakeholder engagement is important in allowing other stakeholders, community-based organizations, local units of government, other entities that can support the grant or the brownfield assessment and cleanup and redevelopment process by providing incentives and capital investments, allocating staff time, how they're going to schedule and prioritize projects, and other supportive actions at the community and site-specific level to help brownfield programs be successful and move forward. Next slide. And so, the wide range of stakeholders are all going to have different priorities and concerns, and it's important to understand what those are and tailor specific engagement methods to reach specific audiences. It's also critically important to be fully inclusive of a wide range of stakeholders, even within each of these categories. So what's sometimes most important to residents, regulatory agencies, and community-based organizations might not match with the reality of what property owners, developers, and business owners see as feasible. So squarely in the middle of all these stakeholder interests are the property owners themselves. And, I'm going to talk about how to engage with those and the do's and don'ts of what I've learned over the years. So next slide. So up front, very few brownfield projects focus on orphaned or abandoned sites, or sites that are tax delinquent, scheduled for foreclosure. There are instances that I've worked on in the past 20 years where brownfield grants were intended or attempted to be used as an enforcement tool, and unfortunately, sometimes that is necessary. But in 95% of the cases that I've worked with, brownfield funding is not being used as an enforcement tool. It's a completely voluntary participation program. It's an amazing opportunity to establish public-private partnerships and fuel, both public development of sites and private development of sites by using a wide range of incentives, that result or support, a common goal or common good for communities in revitalizing these sites. Also, I've learned that successful property owner engagement, involves focusing on owners of sites where there is some type of near-term redevelopment opportunity that's going to deliver transformative results for the community. So these are some of the essential ingredients. Next slide. So just to recap, two essential things when you're talking about successful property owner engagement are identifying and working with motivated and engaged property owners. Also needed are motivated, engaged developers if that's what's being proposed at a site. So there's multiple layers of having motivated and engaged stakeholders on these projects. And typically, the only way you can have a well-informed, motivated, and engaged property owner is that there is some type of feasible near-term cleanup and reuse plan. So going back to that question that I'm asked all the time, how do I get a nuisance property owner with a property that's causing blight and potentially massive impacts to human health and environment interested in our program? My answer has evolved to be, wow, if you're focusing on the negatives and you're not talking about approaching this property owner because their site has some potential to be of massive benefit to the community, to help us transform and catalyze additional development. If you're squarely just focused on approaching property owners that have the greatest blight and historically haven't been engaged in wanting to move their site forward, then perhaps you should either move to a different property where there is a more motivated and feasible situation, or you can craft out some of the funding from your grant to really look at the market potential if it hasn't been done, really get a full range of voices to the table about what the property potential is, and then and only then approach this property owner and say, hey, we put together quite a opportunity for your site, and I think it's a win-win for all people, and go about it that direction. So next slide. Yeah, so some of the pitfalls, I've touched on them already. As environmental consultants, we might be guilty sometimes of avoiding, that feasibility question, and, might be very interested in doing, environmental site assessment or cleanup of a heavily contaminated site, with, unique contaminants of concern, soil, sediment, groundwater, vapor, you name it. But the goals of the programs that I work on are to generate near-term economic development, jobs, tax-based revenue, enhance green space, provide additional community services. And so we should look for biases towards funding science experiments with brownfield grants and really focus on the goals of the community. I think I don't want to beat a dead horse, but utilizing funding as an enforcement tool, although sometimes necessary, should be avoided. You don't want to go in there arm twisting for participation in the program, get a property owner engaged in the project, and then find out that there's extensive contamination at their property that makes the redevelopment potential way less feasible. And in fact, now that we've found contamination at your property, you're required to do this and that from the state, So we definitely want to avoid arm twisting for participation. And then a pretty obvious statement, you want to avoid projects where the risk of that happening, the risk of there being contamination and a lot of costs without contingencies greatly outweighs the potential reward from redeveloping those properties. So to close on the next slide here, the best practices for engaging with property owners are to start with sites that have feasible cleanup and reuse plans and strategies, or if they don't exist, to start off that way versus diving in or trying to convince somebody to assess a property without there being an obvious incentive for them to do that. When I start new programs in communities across the country, the best way to get the program additional support within the community and get off to a good start is by generating early success stories. And the way to do that oftentimes is to identify a project that's well underway, that has maybe gone through the permitting process or has a sound funding mechanism and all the engaged stakeholders that you need for a project, and really leverage existing momentum on an existing project, create a win, and then use that to promote the project to projects that might be a little earlier on in the development process. It's also important to for communities to provide incentives, allowing a property owner to access their grant funds is one way. And then communities have a wide range of other incentives, facade improvements, you name it. There are incentives to provide, including tax incentives, usually at the state and local levels. So providing an incentive package to help deals pencil out is really important. Then, also important is developing accurate costs and schedules. So if you're living in a fantasy world and you're just going through an assessment process and, you get some data and you don't continually reevaluate, what the next steps are, how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost, that can be an obvious, typical derailment of a project. So we want to get involved in projects at the community level that we can see through. And it starts with, accurate cost and schedule expectations, and then regular updates to those as additional information is learned. Another thing that's fundamentally important is discussing the pros and cons, with these property owners and other stakeholders all along the way, So at a phase one level, the risk is typically, much lower, than when we get into actually physically collecting data at the phase two environmental site assessment level. But there are still, pros and cons and things to think about when you're financially vested in a potentially contaminated site. So always being upfront about these, once again, not arm twisting, but making sure that the stakeholders in your program are fully informed is fundamentally important. And then contingency plans and alternatives. Very few things in the brownfield realm don't have, real world alterations along the way that need to be addressed. And so having, an understanding of what those potentially are, and having, for example, funding set aside, for different scenarios, if you just plan out, an initial phase one environmental site assessment and then some type of preliminary phase two environmental site assessment, the odds are that, you're going to have to do a phase one update, or if time passes long enough, an entirely new phase one report, or if the preliminary results from a phase two, indicate that there's some type of environmental impact, oftentimes the supplemental investigation can be much more costly. So defining contingency plans and alternatives is of utmost importance, as well as a best practice for successfully engaging with property owners and creating momentum in your community and success stories that'll also fuel additional participation. So next slide. With that, I know we've got a mechanism for Q&A. You can enter your questions into the window, and I believe that we'll be addressing as many of those questions as we can at the end of this presentation. And if we can't get to some of them, I also believe there'll be a mechanism for us responding afterwards. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Krista to talk about the amazingly exciting and transformative work that she's been leading over at the Houston Land Bank. So thank you. And Krista, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. If you can advance to the next slide, and just as a disclaimer for everyone who is watching, you are more than welcome. Of course, this is obviously a recorded presentation, and feel free to reach out to us later at the end of this presentation with any specific question and answers. I'm with the Houston Land Bank, the president CEO, and on the next slide, you'll see a little bit about what a land bank is in the case you are not familiar. And in short, they are a government entity that is created to respond to neighborhood needs. There's over 300 across the country. The Houston Land Bank is the largest one in terms of our geographic reach. And I'm going to share a little bit about some of the programs of how we were able to activate vacant, abandoned, dilapidated, and contaminated land over the course of really the last 3 years is when we started our Brownfields program in 2022, which is the same time that I became president. And I'm going to share a little bit about some of the partnerships that we have built and are still building, to be transparent, and leveraging the impact. On the next slide, you're going to see a little bit more about our mission, which is to activate vacant, abandoned, dilapidated properties. And we were created by the city of Houston in order to do that. Our geographic reach is the entire city limits, but we do also expand into Harris County. So we doubled our size really in the last few months of where we're able to impact. But we do more than just housing. That's our main focus, but we are able and eligible to impact properties that are economic development, green space, food insecurity solutions. And we do that by basically creating programs. We define the policy, we find the partner to take on the long-term stewardship. Next slide, please. And we do that in a sense like a real estate development company is how we were defined. We're a professional service provider that can do anything from the inception of a project. So creating the vision, working with the community on community engagement, doing the pro forma analysis, of course, the environmental screening, and then we find our building partners, our developer partners, our financial institutions. We work with the local government and elected officials when it comes to policies of activating surplus property, for example, or working with local churches on some of the properties that they want to do. And I'm going to share a very specific case study so you can see a little bit about how this works into practice. Next slide, please. Well, like I said earlier, we launched our Brownfields program, and you all know what a brownfield is, so I won't have to educate you on that. We can move forward, but we did start our Brownfields programming back in 2022 with a $600,000 assessment grant, which has been fully expended. Now we're working on a $500,000 assessment grant and a $5 million cleanup grant. And I'm going to share a little bit about some of our reuse planning projects that we were able to activate with the assessment support. Next slide. Well, pause. I'm sorry, I'm gonna take it back. So there was a partnership opportunity that was presented to us by Fannie Mae, where we knew that we owned property anywhere between 1,200 square feet to 6 acres. And there was all these different parcel sizes, which meant several opportunities of what could take place. My background is in architecture and community development. And when it comes to creating a place, you really can't do a cookie cutter type of solution. But we also had some smaller parcels that were around 3,000 square feet that were really challenging for our builders in order to have a pool and a floor plan. So we partnered with Fannie Mae in addition to our community land trust Trust, Smart Home America, the Institute of Building and Home Safety, in addition to the host of architects, CenterPoint Energy, and KeyHTX is our sustainability consultant, in order to create a catalog of pre-permitted, energy efficient, and affordable floor plans. So when we sell our land, we can tie that floor plan to it. But we also work directly with the community in order to define what does home look like in one neighborhood versus the other. What does the character look like on the porch? What is the facade? What's the height? What's the materials? What's the colors? We're almost done with that particular catalog, and that should be done within the next month or so. But this really gave us an opportunity to not just define what's happening on a parcel, but what's happening in a bigger neighborhood and in a place, and creating a model that could be replicated throughout the city. So we're actually expanding this initiative into several other neighborhoods as we're securing more funding partners to get more floor plans. Next slide is showing a specific site that we started with, which I like to call our first brownfield baby, which was the former, excuse me, Yellow Cab Taxi headquarters, which is just outside of downtown. It was about maybe 6 acres or so in total. The city of Houston gave us a grant back in 2019 for $10 million to buy larger tracts because we were expanding our programming and our partnership reach. And these was one of the tracts that we secured. We were able to secure the funds for tracts 1 and 3, which is on the slide, but unfortunately the city didn't have the funds in order to close on the middle tract, which is shown in orange as tract number 2. So through a combination of working with the community, because we knew we didn't have the money to close, but we were seeking to align with another mission-based partner. We had to define the vision with the community. So we started off there. We hosted several community meetings. We had pro bono architectural services donated to us from Perkins and Will, which is a local a national architectural firm who has a social purpose program. So they were able to donate their service to us so we can help define the vision. So then when I was talking to partners such as the Housing Authority, but particularly Harris County had the most interest, we were able to show them what's the vision, do the pro forma analysis, and then they were able to use their ARPA dollars in order to close on the site. So we're jointly developing this site together. We're coordinating the color palettes, we're coordinating the income levels, we're coordinating the community engagement together. But the Houston Land Bank is taking the lead on the 2 sites that I previously identified for single family development. We're estimating at least 40 affordable homes will be created. And we're going to use the floor plans from the Finding Home initiative that I just explained in partnership with Fannie Mae. So we're also aligning with Harris County, and they're doing affordable multifamily. We're doing affordable single family, and we're coordinating our press releases and the demo days and groundbreaking, etc. So I share all that to say that partnership, it doesn't have to work in a silo. You can leverage several initiatives and opportunities on top of each other so you can stretch the resources, but also maximize the impact. So on the next slide, I believe is the closing slide. This is just how you can find us for more information, but I'm going to pass it off to Matthew so we can hear more about his experience with Brightfields.
Great. Thanks, Krista. And thanks, everyone. My name is Matthew Popkin. I am a manager at Rocky Mountain Institute, and I founded and lead our Brightfields Accelerator technical assistance program. I'll explain a little bit more what all of those words mean in a moment. I'll just also note I've been working in both the brownfields and the energy space for most of my professional career. And on the side, outside of my day job here at RMI, I also serve as the chair of my city's Urban Renewal Authority in Colorado. So I see the brownfields issue and redevelopment opportunities from multiple different sides of the equation. Next slide, please. So when we talk about reactivating brownfields with clean energy, I'll leave my contact information there if you want. What we're really meaning is this is reuse planning, right? We're talking about a specific type of reuse planning, and with that comes different types of partners. But to get to that point, we need to understand a few terms before we get to the panel. Next slide, please. So if you aren't familiar with Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI is an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We are not an energy developer. We are dedicated to accelerating a prosperous, clean energy future for all. We were founded in 1982. We work both across the United States and across multiple different countries, really working on a combination of research, whole systems thinking, unconventional partnerships, and many other strategies to ultimately advance a sustainable energy transition. Next slide. Our Brightfields Accelerator program that's now been in effect for about 3 years is a direct partnership with Kansas State University's Technical Assistance to Brownfields program, the Center for Creative Land Recycling's Technical Assistance to Brownfields program, and the Tribal TAB program as well. And we basically work with communities really from EPA regions 5 through 10 plus tribes across the country to directly educate and assist communities on clean energy reuse options. We'll keep going because I think some of you are already familiar with the TAB program. So Brightfields reuse previously disturbed, often contaminated land to reactivate sites and support a local energy transition. Sam, do you mind if I share my screen here or no? If you can stop sharing for a moment, looks like something didn't copy over, right? Thank you. So Brightfields, thank you. Brightfields reuse previously disturbed, often contaminated land to reactivate sites and support a local energy transition. You all know what brownfields look like and what they can be. And really, a Brightfield is just a broad, encompassing word for a type of redevelopment where renewable energy, typically solar, is built on a former brownfield or Superfund site. And it can be built on the land. It can be built, as you see up there, on a steel mill itself, and using that exoskeleton and kind of using the site creatively. Brightfields come in all shapes and sizes. Again, most of them are solar, but as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, we do have some wind energy projects out there. There's some battery storage, 1 or 2 geothermal and biomass. So really, it's just a question of an energy reuse of a brownfield site. Brightfields have been and can be built safely and responsibly. I'm not coming at you with something that is impossible nor irresponsible. Has this been done before? Yes. Over 624 clean energy projects have been built on brownfields, closed landfills, and other contaminated sites as of a year ago. So more have come online since then. And you can see the breakdown by type of site. You got a lot of the majority are landfill and landfill buffer. Some on brownfield, some on Superfund, other contaminated sites and RCRA sites, about 30 mining sites. So you'll have a whole range of different sites by site type. Is it safe? Well, I hope so, because we've built quite a few. Yes, and particularly you want to take certain precautions to not damage the existing landfill cap or other infrastructure. Procurement processes can specifically seek qualified developers who understand the challenges of building on these types of sites. A lot of potential here. This map here shows Brightfields deployed through 2024 across the US. You can see that distribution making their way into most states. There are only a few states that do not have any Brightfield deployed at this time. But there are over 190,000 potential brownfield sites that the EPA is kind of screened for potential clean energy reuse. We specifically looked at 4,300 closed or inactive landfills that could potentially host enough power to power the entire state of South Carolina. And again, only 624 completed projects as of last fall. So the potential is quite large. And so while a few states, as you saw before, initially led the Brightfields push, the types of projects that are becoming part of the clean energy transition across America vary widely. And you can see this from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to Phoenix, Arizona, Rivesville, West Virginia, Columbus, Ohio, Martin County, Kentucky, and many, many other states. So this is not just limited to 1 or 2 states, though there are a few states that have really kind of taken the reins of this and run with it. And just one last slide here. If you're interested, I mentioned we're not a Brightfields developer. We coordinate with some of them on occasion, but we are a technical assistance provider to communities and help communities navigate multiple partnerships, which we'll talk more about on the panel in a moment. But in terms of technical assistance that's available, this is free technical assistance through the TAB program through KSU and CClear. So if you're a community here and you're curious about whether one of your sites might be feasible for this, feel free to reach out. We do not build these projects at the end of the day. What we can help you with is identify the most promising Brightfields opportunities, help engage with your utility strategically, understand the funding and financing landscape that is ever evolving, shall we say, and then help accelerate Brightfield's procurement from direct procurement support, RFQs, RFPs, to understanding what kind of market you might be stepping into. So again, with that, I will pause here and look forward to joining Chris and Krista on the panel.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. And Sam, I think we can take the slide down, though. Appreciate having everybody's titles and affiliations up here. I'm really inspired, having walked through such a wide range of types of brownfields projects and really seen what is possible from all of you as you shared the different types of partnership structures you've worked with. I'd love to start with a question for Krista, and I also encourage everyone in the audience to add your questions in the Q&A. Great to see we have people here from Hawaii to Louisiana, Connecticut, Missoula. Great mix today. So Krista, I was really excited just to see the names of all the entities behind the Finding Home initiative. Can you talk us through how you brought such a group together with so many different interests and different ways that they can engage on housing and redevelopment and brownfields issues?
Sure, absolutely. And also just want to say that, partnership and brownfields and just community development in general is definitely not a hero sport. So I didn't do all those things, not just me, right? I'm the leader of the organization, but my team member, Lindsay Williams, leads the coordination of that. It started in terms of me just publicly speaking at a land bank conference. And one of the people in the audience was from Fannie Mae. She introduced herself, and then it was the relationship building of understanding how we could support as a professional service provider. We're not considered a grantee. We're a professional service provider. And that service was to work with the community to educate them about affordable housing, and home buying education is incorporated in that initiative. So we have a whole separate MOU with somebody else to provide free home buyer educational services. And then they also brought on Rural Studio, who was a part of their network. And then they also brought on Smart Home America. And then we actually met the Institute for Building and Home Safety through a grant application because of something else. So my point is it kind of starts as a spider web once you really start building the relationships and people start referring to each other. And then we also incorporated builder training into that as well. So not only will those homes be fortified, which is the name of the designation, which makes it resilient and energy efficient, but the builders will also be able to use that same technology and learning practices as they're building other homes that aren't even a part of the land bank. We're inviting other people into the ecosystem, especially with Houston being the most disaster prone area in the United States. So my point is it sometimes just starts off with that one person, but as you continue to build the momentum, you tell your story about it, you publicly identify the opportunities that you're seeking for aligned partners, then it can grow and manifest into something that is bigger than probably you'll ever imagine. We actually just got our contract renewed, and we have a whole nother project of building a demonstration home of one of them that will also serve as our office for community events and space. And you continue to be a catalyst is my point.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, I'm inspired by that reminder of how that first connection can lead to something much bigger. And also love the demonstration projects. That's something that we do a lot of at Smart Growth America, including pop-up style work for complete streets. We have a question in the audience, which I think aligns with something we discussed in advance, Matthew, to both look at what the impacts are of the loss of federal funding for solar projects and Brightfields, as well as, I think if you could expand that to also talk about the market currently for, given that we may have folks on the line who haven't worked in renewable energy before.
Yeah, I mean, we're cutting to the chase already here. Great. Thanks, Amy, and thanks, Catherine, for those questions. I'll try to answer both in combination here. When we think about the market for energy, really what you're thinking about is what is the price you're paying for the additional electricity that is created from a specific project compared to your current energy bill. That's really what we're looking at here. And when we also, and then, so set that aside for a second. And then when we think about a brownfield project, I mean, how many of us have worked on a brownfield project and expected it to be assessed, cleaned up, reused, and reactivated in 6 months or in a year? I mean, these are often long haul projects. They take a lot of collaboration, a lot of partnership, as both Chris and Krista explained in their examples too. And so it's, you know, the energy market is in flux significantly right now. There is both a decline, a sunsetting of federal incentives right now, though they're not gone entirely. And I think that's an important distinction. It depends what we're talking about. For solar projects, they're expected to sunset, pardon the pun, kind of by end of 2027. And so there's some strategy of when you might want to bid on those projects. That's something that we're helping communities with right now, is just unpacking like what makes sense for their site or their community or their needs. And then there's strategy when we get to the partnership side of things, there's strategy of who you're pulling in at what points. And so I'd be curious, Amy, perhaps we can sidebar after this. I'll make sure to give you my email to understand exactly kind of where you all are in terms of your market and what your situation is. But there's strategy in when you engage with your utility, when you engage with the market, what type of partner you're looking for from that developer. Sometimes they're going to work through a lot of different reuse hoops, because really what we're talking about is if you have a municipal landfill or a municipal brownfield, or partnering with a private site owner, you're looking at partnerships that include the public and the private site owner or the public site owner. Then you're looking at the energy buyer or the energy off-taker, the person that's going to actually, the entity that's actually going to consume that electricity. That could be the utility. In some situations, the utility might just buy that power. In other cases, it might be a direct off-taker, such as like a data center, a hospital, a city, that would buy that power. Then you're looking at the developer, you're looking at the community around where the project will be sited, and often you're dealing with a state regulatory agency as well. That should be thought of as a partner here, right? They have rules they have to follow, but ultimately they're trying to figure out how does this reuse fit into that rules schematic that they have to work with. Some states are much further advanced than others in how they navigate and provide clear processes, or don't, on how they navigate siting of clean energy on these types of properties. So you want to look at that whole ecosystem of partnerships and when you engage. And so the federal incentive landscape, coming back to the original part of the question, is rapidly evolving. Wind and solar are sunsetting over the next 2 years for now, at least. We'll see what happens after that. And then energy storage is still continuing. That's sustained. That did not go away. So that tax credit is still there. And then you have other funding sources for different types of energy and innovation there. So like I said, solar projects that make up like 95% of Brightfield's to date so far. But I think we're going to see a rapid expansion of the types of technologies that are deployed to meet the ever-growing demand for energy.
Thanks, Matthew, and thanks, Amy, for jumping right in there. We actually have a follow-up question on Brightfield. So Matthew, I'll keep you going right here. From Bridge. Bridge, nice to see you on the line today. A question around how brownfields are being used for data centers and strategies for promoting Brightfields. Whether you're seeing that as a binary discussion around Brightfields versus data centers. I think data centers is such a big land use issue right now in terms of energy as well as transportation and air quality, et cetera. So yeah, I'll start with Matthew, and I'd be happy to hear from the broader panel on the question around data centers as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know better than to get between someone and their smartphone, right? But like, ultimately, what we're talking about here is the energy user, right? That off-taker that we're talking about. I mean, this is a private sector off-taker that needs energy, and we're talking about the siting that either is displaced by that or could be co-located with. And what I would suggest folks thinking about when they're receiving data centers or other large energy users in their community, they look at co-location. Can you site either on rooftop on top of the data center on the brownfield? Can you do side by side? Do you need all of that land? Maybe there's some less buildable area for like a full data center that you actually could strategically site some solar and storage around to provide some of the capacity or energy needs that the data center needs. There are a whole host of ways to think about it. It's a great question because I know I've heard from multiple communities who are actively trying to wrestle with this question, especially as the data centers really start to draw a lot of energy from the existing grid if they don't bring on new capacity at the same time.
Thank you. Would others like to chime in on this? We are starting to get some great questions, so I've also got a next one teed up.
I was just going to say, in my world where I'm helping communities submit compelling grant applications to get funding, and of course there's a new administration this year. They've identified their pillars, for what their priorities are. And one intersection with brownfields in the new administration is the interest in becoming, a global AI leader, and all the data centers that are involved there. So I do have some clients with large tracts of land, that could be well positioned for data centers. So finding common ground and giving the administration what they want in this day and age, is an important part of a funding application.
Well, Chris, I might keep the next question with you. We have a question from Kimberly around industry standard for liability regarding the potential for exacerbating existing contamination. We also had some interest in the chat earlier from someone, this is way at the start, who joined today to learn more about liability in brownfields redevelopment. So yeah, it'd be great to hear your thoughts for this question. I may also pass it to Krista after that as well, if you'd like.
I'll admit the words in that question blew my mind a little bit. So I may need a chance to think through that, off screen here. But I am thinking of successful brownfield projects, that we've been participated in that didn't start off with an obvious fit between, a property owner with liability and a community, and the way those projects typically go forward are a purchase and sale agreement, that has acceptable risks and rewards on both sides. Sometimes a community or a project can be so important to a community that the community is willing to accept some of the risk, because the rewards are so great and the potential is so great to clean this property up and provide a massive benefit to the community. So there are cool things in states, that include, limiting liability for prospective purchasers of brownfield properties and alleviate, some of the responsibilities of a property owner that isn't potentially, the actual responsibility person party for the contamination. So I probably didn't answer the question square on, but there are mechanisms available, to limit liability and to protect folks. And, those should be taken advantage of whenever you can.
I can't speak to the specifics of the perspective of a developer, especially considering I'm a governmental entity. We kind of have a different perspective on it, but I will say that to Chris's point, we don't really focus on things that are shovel ready. We focus on things that are shovel worthy. And I know the risk of taking on a former trash incinerator. We're, looking into some other former industrial uses, and especially with Houston being an oil and gas city and a city with no zoning. I've absolutely adopted my partners and our consultants philosophy of everything is a brownfield until proven not guilty. And really here in Houston, we also are taking the role of educating people on what brownfields are, but also the possibilities of what you can do with them. Specifically to answer the risk liability component, I'm seeking, this isn't in place yet, but one of the things I'm seeking in terms of a partnership is an MOU with the TCEQ, who's the State Agency for Environmental Quality, because me being a government entity and additionally, my mission is to activate these vacant abandoned properties, having some environmental liability released from us because of our specific purpose is a model that's actually been done nationally with other land banks. Specifically, I am modeling the New York Land Bank, who has an interlocal agreement with their state agency to do that. And they literally are required to take on brownfields. I'm asking for them. So, so to your point, I can't speak specifically to some of the environmental liabilities that would be waived because I'm not an attorney, but I will say that there may be some other avenues if there's a local land bank, for example, or of course, talking to an attorney to see what your options are in the case that you are a private developer on that front.
Thanks, Krista. And we're getting more and more questions, but I think we have one which is a kind of perfect closer from Mimi. I'd love to hear from you all what considerations you make when establishing partnerships. And today you all introduced different projects, as case studies with different partners involved. Like what aspects of those partnerships have made them so effective? So if you could try to do a one-liner for each, what makes a great partner and what makes your current partnerships effective, that would be great. And I'll also ask everyone in the audience, please add in the chat if there's more resources on partnerships that the National Brownfields Coalition, Smart Growth America, or any of the organizations represented on the call can provide for you. It's been great to have vibrant discussion today, and we can follow up with this group by email after the webinar as well. So Matthew, you seem ready. I'm going to pass it to you first.
Sure. Well, one of the most important partners in an energy project is the utility, with a few exceptions if it's connected behind the meter of the facility and just powering that facility. So when you think about what makes a good utility partnership, I often think of it as, look, you're adding energy into a system. You're not just starting on an island, and you're not just operating in that set way. So you want to think about, how does your project that you're working on actually feed into a broader system and is complementary to that system? So you want to hear from the utilities as to what their needs are at a system level, from a technical level, and perhaps how maybe some tweaks in the project design or the structure could actually help enhance how it works for the grid and not against. So I think you always want to think about, what are their needs, what are their constraints that they, technical or political, that might be working under, and then try to work with them to develop a project that kind of fits within that whole puzzle.
Thank you, Matthew. Krista?
Well, because I consider everybody a partner, and I do mean that broadly and narrow in scope. I think it just depends on, you have to find out what their strength is and finding that linkage, right? Some people are a partner because they help amplify our voice when I'm not in the room, right? They're talking about the projects that we're doing, what event that they went to, they're introducing me to people, they're an advocate role. There's some people that really want to help shape your strategy. They want to invest into, how can I improve our workforce development strategy? Because in a sense, that's what we do. How can I even just strategize politically? Because it's really all the forms of capital. It's not just the money. It's not just transaction. You have to, like I said, build a relationship. And I was able to leverage different relationships that I had at my prior role, because I used to work for the city of Houston for almost 10 years. I worked in the mayor's office directly advocating for local community-based organizations such as the Land Bank. I was fundraising on their behalf for different initiatives that were happening in some of the under-resourced communities. It's partially just being in multiple spaces, but it's also building that connection with the person, because especially as a nonprofit, and philanthropy really starts at the heart. It starts with finding whatever that human connection is for what you're trying to achieve, for your respective mission, for that respective project, and how will this amplify it with their help, because they want to help you and they want to be a part of the process, but you have to invite them into the process and be transparent about what you're struggling with.
Thank you, Krista. Thanks for reminding us too, it all starts with people, and so much of our work about built environment and housing and natural spaces, it's all about supporting people. So Chris, if you can end us on a one-liner, what makes an effective partnership from your perspective? We'll end right on time.
As a consultant, my role in Brownfields is to solve more problems than I create, so a good partner for me in my space is somebody who has a problem that I can help solve, so I think that is key, and I'll end with that.
Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. Wonderful to share the space with you and to get to know some of you with great questions. Please be in touch in the future and join us at the National Brownfields Coalition. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.